the Flames, here's the thing. They've beaten the Islanders. They beat Montreal. They've played some of these, and I don't know where you look at the Flames. They're in a playoff spot somewhat comfortably right now. So if you look at the, they've beaten some of those teams. This was going to be the litmus test, the measuring stick, whatever you want to call it, for not only the team, but also Dustin Wolf, who has been very good. And shots were 49-29. They win 3-2 in regulation. Wolf was very good. Shesterkin was great, but Wolf also held them in. A 3-2 home ice win over the reigning President's Trophy winners.
Yeah.
We're kind of dipping our toes in. Some fans are all in. We kind of do the, hey, are you in? I don't know. Are you in? It's I don't know if it's points or gap between where you are and the playoff line or the calendar, American Thanksgiving, but we're kind of well into it now. That was game 20 last night for the Flames.
Yeah, I mean, and that's why there's reason to believe, right? I mean, you're a quarter way through the NHL regular season, and this is what you're seeing from the Calgary Flames in all areas. It's not like one area in particular is bolstering the team, carrying the team, dragging the team through tough games. I think they've got a little bit of everything. And when one part of their game, one area of their game sags a little bit, there seems to be another part of the game that rises to the occasion. So, again, we always qualify by saying it's a long year. Yeah, of course it is. But you know what? It's a long year for 32 teams, not just the teams that we thought weren't going to be as good, and Calgary would have been in that category. But, I'm going to share a little bit of a history lesson here, and I'm not trying to name drop, but I remember back in the day, my kid was playing hockey with the Whitby Wildcats. We were invited, Cole Perfetti was on that team. We were invited to go to Los Angeles to play the junior LA Kings in a friendly, just a weekend. Pat Brisson's son was on that team. Nelson Emerson. I mean, Craig Johnson. It was just a collection, right? It was an NHL player. It's where Rob Blake, his son, played on that team. I mean, all of the old LA Kings had sons. They made up the junior Kings and they played hockey. Dustin Wolf was a goaltender. And I remember watching this kid, and I want to say they were maybe 13, 14 at the time. And I'm standing at the glass with Pat Brisson, and I'm asking about the goalie, and he's like, Dregs, I'll try and do my French accent. Dregs, let me tell you, I think he's going to be a really good NHL player. And I was like, really? Like, how can we see that? Like, I mean, especially in a goaltender. But that's always stuck with me. And, I've watched him elevate his play at every level. He was so done or seemed to be with the American League. And now, there's a question mark beside the goaltending going into the season because Jacob Markstrom isn't there. Not because what they had wasn't capable. And I think now 20 games in, I don't mean to jinx these guys, but 20 games in, I think we're seeing enough that goaltending is just a positive part of the equation in Calgary and no longer should be considered a big question mark. At least that's my vantage point.
I would see it as their greatest strength, Dregs. I know there's lots to like here, but they went a stretch of 3 home games where they scored 4 goals that weren't into a shootout goal. They won all 3. That's only when you get elite goaltending, and that's what Wolf's given them for 3 weeks.
Yeah, man. I mean, you look around the National Hockey League, and not to derail, but just to support what you just said there. The Ottawa Senators play the Vegas Golden Knights last night. Going into that game, the pressure was starting to build on Linus Ullmark. I mean, you're talking about a proven NHL starter, decorated starter, a very self-critical man. And the team was doing whatever they could to bolster his confidence. He's fine. He's going to get back to his standard, back to his form. And yet, not that it was on him entirely, but that's an example of a team that thought, okay, let's trade for this guy, which they did at the draft. Let's lock him up, which they did recently. Thankfully, our goaltending issue is behind us. Well, is it? 20 games in, I'm not so sure it is. They're counting on him rebounding, but goaltending generally across the league, unless you've got the top of the class and few teams have, is always going to be there. But it can also be a positive, like we're seeing with the Flames.
And there's going to be, like you say, every team goes through it. But they've stashed away some points here. You can now absorb a bad week to 10 days after you've had points in 7 of 8 and have won 3 straight and that sort of thing. So we played a clip from Mackenzie Weegar. We talked a little bit about it. the one thing that this team has not had, and I think some teams struggle with it, there hasn't really been an identity. When you prepare for the Flames or you come into Calgary, what is it? Well, we don't really know. Are they whatever?
Yeah.
But he had said last night, we come at you in waves. We are going to forecheck you. We're going to cause turnovers. We have an identity, and it's a cliche word, and it's a thing that we use. But when it comes out of the locker room, and we talked about, I think that it's legit. They don't score a ton, but they're a bugger to play against most nights.
Yeah, and look, if that truly becomes the identity, and if it is the identity, and that's the resolve and the belief inside that room, then that's a hell of a lot of confidence. And I'm not here to question it even a little bit. But as you're describing that, Boomer, I'm thinking of another team, and I'm thinking of, the Carolina Hurricanes and how Rod Brind'Amour absolutely demands that. You can see the talent shift between lines 1 and 4 in Carolina, but they play the same way. I mean, it's not negotiable. That's how you play. You forecheck hard, you attack with speed, you force turnovers, and make sure you're sound defensively. The goaltending is good enough to get you through, and you win hockey games. And Carolina has done an excellent job, superior to what I thought they were going to be this year. So if Calgary is borrowing that identity, but the players believe it, and they think that they're executing that, that's a tough one to top. It is, because you look around the league and there's so many teams that have more talent, obviously, than the Calgary Flames, obviously. But the coaches are pulling out their hair because they can't get those guys to believe in what it takes to win and playing the way that you described. So if they've got that, man, that's a key ingredient.
Rhett, have you ever played on a team that maybe didn't have a lot of skill, but worked hard and really rode hot goaltending?
Yeah.
Actually, let me ask you, have you ever played on a team where that wasn't the makeup, where it wasn't just really good goaltending and hard work and maybe a little bit of skill? No. Like Kiprusoff and the Flames, Hasek and the Sabres, back to the Panthers. That's all you've done, right?
Yeah, that's 100% what we had. And the goaltender, you just can't overlook it. And no one has said you should overlook it.
No.
I mean, I just think the interesting thing, anyway, in my head, I'm thinking about Nashville, and they went and added all this talent and maybe lost some of the chemistry. And I'm not saying that Marchessault and Stamkos are an issue for the room, and maybe the roster isn't as good as maybe we thought.
Yeah.
But the Flames are overcoming that and playing up to a level, not playing down.
Sure.
And they're not getting goaltending in Nashville right now.
They're not. And exactly what you said, Rhett, I think that's what's keeping Barry Trotz up at night. You were the guy that said this first, that you thought that they went too hard too soon. And that's a few weeks ago, and nothing really has improved. There have been blips, but they haven't consistently improved even a little bit. So I'm sure Barry, he's sitting there looking at what his team isn't doing. But now he's looking around the conference and he's seeing a team like Calgary, who he probably didn't have on his bingo card as being 10th overall in the National Hockey League at the quarter mark, and going, okay, look, I'm comparing rosters and lineups here again. Is that coach that much better than the guy I got on my bench? Well, no, he's not. So what's missing here? When you bring in pieces like they brought in, and I'm looking at the two forwards. I'm looking at Brady Shea. I'm not looking at Brady Shea. I'm looking at Stamkos and Marchessault. And Stamkos was just so used to playing the game the way he wanted to play the game. And John Cooper was fine with it, right? I mean, Stammer had his role. But Cooper would lean on the Seravallis and the guys that he knew he could trust in certain situations. But Stamkos was there to do one thing, and that was to produce offense. And now they're kind of looking at each other around that Nashville organization going, all right, well, somebody's got to have to fix it. I haven't heard a whole lot of finger pointing from within the dressing room. I really haven't. But what I can tell you is Nashville is right at a place where something's going to break here in the next 5 games, maybe 5 games. And what is that? I don't, having Jim Montgomery twisted out there a little bit, that makes the storylines in Detroit and Nashville of coach change more sexy, right? Because now you've got when you ask the question, okay, well, who's better out there? Well, Jim Montgomery is not bad. He's
his record.
Yeah, his record in Boston was bananas, and he gets fired. So I can appreciate why there'd be some scrutiny on Andrew Burnett in Nashville, but I'm not convinced that that's the card that Trotz is going to play, that something's going to give there in the next 4 or 5 games.
Shut out 2 of their last 3 games. 2-0 here, 3-0 in Seattle, their last game. No, tough time scoring 3 goals or more.
Centers are an issue.
Big time issues at center.
And it's not got a lot to do with it, but Askarov, I saw played his first game. He didn't win, but 2 on 29 or 31 or whatever it was. So that'll be an interesting watch too as they go forward. You mentioned Montgomery. What have you heard? Because it seemed like got to the point it was inevitable. They gave up 2 shorthanded goals the one game, and he had flipped all the switches that he seemingly could have.
Yeah.
What else are you hearing? Not looking to throw dirt on a guy, but
Yeah.
It's a high profile firing. I just wonder behind the scenes what the sentiment was.
So I can't remember the last time a general manager came out, spoke to the media, and just exposed the contract discussions and negotiations that didn't lead to an extension. I mean, he point blank said that they offered multiple extensions to Montgomery and he just wouldn't take them. Okay, well, what does that have to do with wins or losses? Nothing. And the team just isn't good enough for starters. I would say it was time for a change, though, in the sense that, as we could see time and time again, Jim Montgomery's a coach. He runs hot. He runs hot on the bench, so he's not worried about what the cameras are seeing, and that's fine. I'm good with that. He certainly holds his players accountable, whether you're the captain, Brad Marchand, or you're a first-year player. Okay, I'm good with that too. But I think that the balance shifted there, where the young guys just flat out lost confidence, right? And the older guys like Marchand and Pasternak and Coyle and Zaka, even throw Charlie McAvoy into the mix, just weren't committed enough to pull the group through, right? And that's why it was interesting to me. And look, I got all the time in the world for Brad Marchand, and what else is he supposed to say? So he comes out and he accepts his role and the responsibility of getting a real good coach fired, a real good human being, Jim Montgomery, fired. I get it, but it didn't look like that based on the way that you guys were playing. So you can say it after the fact, but it almost feels like, I think, when you're in the moment and you can see the crosshairs are lined up by management, maybe ownership in Boston, on your head coach, your play is what dictates whether or not he stays or goes, and their play ultimately led to his dismissal.
How much of that is goaltending in Boston? Right?
Some of it. Yeah.
They just had elite goaltending in Montgomery's whole reign until a month and a half here. Like, you think about, Ullmark won the Vezina 2 years ago. Swayman and Ullmark were sensational. Jennings last year, and now all of a sudden you're not 900, and maybe the Bruins aren't the wagon. They're not worse on paper this year.
No, and I don't know whether or not his negotiation was a distraction. The fact that he missed time, I think Monty, when he finally kind of cracked on that line of questioning, was right. Okay, there's a statute of limitations on that. Like, he's been in NHL games enough that he's up to speed. Stop it with this stuff already. I don't know. Like, Korpisalo has been okay for them. I don't know how much you guys watched him in Ottawa last year, man. Like, that was just a knee jerk. We'll take him because that's part of the deal. But let's they're going to have to figure that out. And they didn't expect that would be an issue based on the way that Jeremy Swayman played last year. So I would agree. And all further to that, Rhett, and maybe it's exposing the goaltending in Boston. From McAvoy through their defensive core, I don't think they've been good enough either. I think they've been porous. I think that McAvoy is a shell of what he is, not what he once was. We know what he is. He's a top defenseman in the National Hockey League, but he's not playing that way. So on top of that, you've got, again, forwards all over the place, and it will be interesting with Sacco now taking over. Ray Ferraro always says this. Do you become a better coach because you move 3 feet up the bench as an assistant to an NHL? No, but I think what Sacco will provide, and I didn't watch all of last night's game, by the way, is just a little settling. Win, lose, or draw, Montgomery was one of the most active coaches there is, period, in the sport. I mean, they could be up by 3 goals and he's scrambling lines and he's doing this and doing that. And I guess when you're winning, that works. When you're losing, pisses the players off because they can't develop any sort of chemistry with one another. So that might be an earmark of what we see in Joe Sacco. They won last night, so we'll see if they can pull it out of the ditch.
Yeah, and look, Lindholm scored last night. It was the only goal, 1-0. Huge relief. He looks to the rafters. It's going to be tough to live up to that contract. The cap rising will help. Yeah. But, I mean, I'm seeing him on a Team Sweden roster as the third-line right winger. He's your number one center now. That's not an area of strength anymore. You used to go Krejci, Bergeron down the middle. Yeah. Those guys are gone. And then the other thing is, the less we saw Zadorov, the more we liked him here over his tenure. Now, there was spells where he looked great, but when he and Goodbranson were just the third pair and they had smaller minutes, God, were they tough to play against. Anytime you tried to elevate him, that's when it was like you could hear the circus music start playing.
You know what? If you get those guys at the trade deadline, which Vancouver experienced last year with Zadorov, and you lean on them for the rest of the regular season and then the playoffs, perfect. That's the exact scenario because both those guys you just talked about, Goodbranson and Zadorov, that's exactly what they're built for. Right. A 6-year contract at big money. Now the guy's going in there, as you guys saw firsthand, thinking, well, worst case, got to be a second pairing because that's what I am. I'm a 2 or a 3. I'm not a 5 or a 6 or a 7. No, you're a 5 or a 6 or a 7 on a 6-year term. That's what you are. The problem is Don Sweeney paid big bucks, likewise for Lindholm, and didn't cover the needs, didn't cover the areas that they needed most. And creativity up the middle of the ice for me, that's their biggest issue. That's right up there.
You mentioned Vancouver about a year ago right now. We were getting ready for Rick Tocchet to be coach of the year. That were a great story. And
he was just on fire.
Right? And now it's no Besser, no JT Miller, no Thatcher Demko, and they're having a heck of a time. Obviously the Miller stuff is unfortunate and all of that, but it almost couldn't have gone worse for the Canucks to start after an unbelievable and then a nice playoff run, a win away from round 3 or whatever it was.
Yeah, I mean, nasty for sure. I do think that coaching staff, though, is well prepared for it. And, you know, one thing we know about Rick Tocchet and by extension, Adam Foote, and go down the list is you got to earn your minutes. It doesn't matter how many times last year, especially with JT Miller, as they call the driver, the energy guy, the head of the snake, the guy who drags you in every single fight. That's what he is. So whatever physical ailment he has that was not allowing him to be that guy, then emotionally started to take a toll because he knew he wasn't playing well enough. The team was struggling. He's frustrated. There was a lot of pressure on JT Miller. And so the takeaway for me with him going on a leave of absence, supported entirely by Tocchet and the organization, is he's a human being, right? He's a human being. So if he goes away and he heals up physically and he recharges mentally and he comes back and he's the player that he was, as long as Elias Pettersson can continue to do what he's been doing, which is generating some offense, then I think we're going to see more of the Vancouver Canucks that we saw last year. But then that also includes Thatcher Demko. Like I'm getting weary of asking about Thatcher Demko.
I know,
because every week I ask and every week I get the same feedback. Now, he's a full participant in practice. He's trending well. He looks great. We just need him to get a few more reps. Well, all right. I mean, like a few more is what, 30? Like,
and what do they do when he's backtracks? They got the kid gloves on. Is it going to be, you can't start him back-to-back games? Like, what do you alternate? Like, what are we doing here?
It feels that way. And I mean, he's got that bizarre injury. I don't even know how to pronounce it, but it's a weird one, right? So I think it's being super cautious and careful, which I can appreciate. So again, if being cautious pays off, it's going to feel like a mega trade when Thatcher Demko comes back into the mix because, just automatically, it's like having the tough guy, even though the game isn't played that way anymore. But guys just play with a little bit more pop when you got a guy sitting at the end of the bench is going to bail you out. And that applies to elite level goaltending, which Demko certainly qualifies for.
Just looking here, Colorado has won 3 of 4. They had that rough start, 4 of 5. So they're swinging. Now Nichushkin is back. Nothing to speak of as far as points in 3 games. I wondered what that integration back into the locker room was going to be like. But I don't know. It's not that with Swayman, right? Swayman, it was more of I'm waiting to get paid. This is a little bit different. But when you come back in, when you've missed the start for whatever reason and expectations for you are high to perform and then you don't, I always wonder. We saw what happened in Boston because Swayman has not been good.
Right.
For Nichushkin, may want to start getting some points here soon, I would think.
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, for his own sake and obviously for the betterment of the Colorado Avalanche. His issues aside, which have been well documented, I like the way he plays the game. And when he's on it, he is on it. And he just gives them that extra layer of threat, right? And so it's not just about Rantanen and Makar and McKinnon. Getting Jonathan Drouin back is a big help too. That guy's career was kind of all over the road. And, he lands in Colorado and seems to be a good fit with his old buddy, Nate McKinnon. So we'll see if he can stay healthy. I still, like everybody else, want to question their goaltending. Yet we're told that unless they have to, they're not really willing or wanting to address it. They think they're okay there. And then they've got all the other pieces out there, like Landeskog. Is he coming back? Isn't he coming back? Like, every day there's a story out of Colorado, including, and I love this one, and I've searched through the games and I can't find it, but there's that never-ending story of Nate McKinnon just losing it every once in a while. And there's rumor of that happening recently with his head coach again, which isn't unusual for Nate, right? Like, he goes hot, and if he doesn't like what the coach is saying, he's not afraid to bark back. But I couldn't find anything to establish the rumor, so we'll see. They've got lots of firepower there, though, that we know.
Well, it's interesting. They're okay with their goaltending. I guess they're okay with 886 and 874 or whatever it is.
They won with Kemper, right? That's the thing. They think they can be better than their goaltending. And to be fair, like, they got Lehkonen back, they got Duran back, they're gonna get Ross Colton back. They did get Taves back. Like, it was a
players.
They had Alfred Shillington playing wing when the goals were going in. Like, it wasn't a good team in front of these guys who aren't great, but they've proven you don't need great goaltending if they're right.
Yeah, and again, based on that star status, how can you count? You can't, and I'm not suggesting anybody is counting Colorado out at any point. They get on a heater at some point here, particularly in the second half. You've got to look at Colorado no differently. You look at Vegas. You look at Dallas, maybe Winnipeg and Edmonton and some of the other top clubs, including Calgary.
When do you worry about Edmonton, real quick? Because it's
right now
awful on home ice. They're not getting saves. The crew line's a mess. And all these old guys they added forward have been outperformed by the young guys they let go, like McCall, like Holloway, like Fogle.
I was told this morning by somebody deep, and not a media person, somebody organizational, that it's dysfunctional from top to bottom there.
Whew.
That's a lot. That's saying a lot. And so now you start to unravel that, okay? And what does that mean? Well, for me, it's pretty obvious where you start, and that's on defense, right? That's on defense. And I haven't been the biggest Cody Ceci fan over the span of his career, but I think if Stan Bowman had a do-over, okay, we can appreciate the Broberg thing because you end up getting almost triple what the Oilers were prepared to pay him in Edmonton. He gets to the offer sheet in St. Louis. But you didn't have to trade Cody Ceci. You didn't have
traded
to.
And not kept. Yeah, they looked like they were going to match. They traded Ceci to open that money up, you thought, but they didn't. They said, but what do you?
Yeah, so that was, if you knew that you weren't going to match, it's not like that offer sheet slapped him upside the head minutes before it was signed. I mean, just managers doing what they did. There would have been some form of communication, either through the agents involved, all of that. So you replace the three defense that you had in Game 7 with three guys that, with all due respect, just aren't there. The puck movement isn't there. Go down the list, and now you got 97 and 29 pissed off at the world, but not in a good way. Not in a way where they want to throw the team on their back and roll. I mean, they're going to compete because that's what those two guys do, but they're probably sitting there asking questions like, what are we doing here? Like, what direction are we going in here?
Was there enough? I don't understand the whole process up there because it seems like everyone outside of the cultural capital could see what they needed.
D.
And you,
Another goalie, D.
And they go completely opposite. They go older and forwards.
They did the deadline too. They went Henrique. They didn't add Medina.
And the Jeff Skinner, I was reading, it's been a disaster too.
Of course it is.
They bought him out. You can't play defense. Is scoring goals a problem for the Oilers?
It's deep and you can't give us too much, but like, who's driving this bus?
Okay, and here's sorry, Trace, and I'll let you feed off this. The president of the organization used to be Connor's agent. A lot of the guys they brought in to plug holes have been his former clients, Wasserman clients. You're talking about most of those blue liners are trying. Kapanen, they just claimed on waivers, like a lot. And this president is trying to do the job out of Toronto, not in Edmonton. You say dysfunction. I'm looking right there.
Yeah. Well, I again, just kind of formulating all the tidbits that are funneling my way. It feels like there may be too many cooks in the kitchen here from a management perspective, right? So now you add an experienced, decorated guy in Stan Bowman. Does Stan have the autonomy of, everybody there is going to say, of course he does. Of course he does. But that doesn't mean that there is an influence and maybe too much input coming from other areas. I have nothing but the utmost respect for Paul Coffey, Hall of Fame defenseman, all that. Like, hockey knowledge out the wazoo. I get that. But I know he's got, a decent relationship with the ownership. So what are the tentacles of all of that, right? Is he staying in the lane and focusing on what his area of expertise is? And that's defense, what his opinion is on that. Is he poking around on the power play? Is he poking around on what he wants to see up front, generally 5-on-5 and all that? And if any of that is true, then I think that's where you get to the point of dysfunction, right?
But it's been an active owner, right? So you got active owner. He likes
which isn't unusual. That's not unusual.
Well, and that's fine. That's his right. And then you've got Jackson and Coffey that have been working together for a while. Now you bring in an experienced GM who's won cups, not perfect, certainly, but it kind of feels like there's puppet strings here.
A little bit. That's, again, they have the capability of flipping the switch and, again, reeling off 3-5 straight wins, whatever. But in the moment, as we're having this conversation, it's not great. It's not great. And the problem that the players, I'm sure, have is they're looking over their shoulder for reinforcements coming.
No kids.
It's not there.
Boy, and it's tough when I'm trying to remember who was it in the NFL called his team soft or were playing soft. In New England. Their criticism isn't necessarily goaltending or they're getting outworked. The compete is missing when it's like that's a shot across the bow. So it could be on the coaches or whatever. There's enough talent in that locker room. You guys can control how hard you work or the amount of try that you put in, and it just hasn't been there, I guess.
And they're not like, look, Bowman would say that it's not defense, it's their top end guys, and it's not just McDavid and Draisaitl, it's Hyman, it's Nugent Hopkins, go down the list, haven't performed on a consistent enough basis, and that's why the team is struggling, and that's putting more pressure on the defense and blah, 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 blah. But look, if it doesn't turn around in the very near future, guess what we're talking about? No different than we did last year. When Edmonton was in the juice, even early in the Stanley Cup final, we're looking at Leon Draisaitl going into the final year and wondering, okay, where is he playing next year? How much? And that stuff is going to start in the near future with the captain. Of course it is, right? Of course it is. So there's all sorts of kind of points of pressure in Edmonton.
It's a bad year to have a bad year if you're Oilers management. This is your window to extend Connor.
Yeah, I would agree.
Hey, guys, thanks for watching. Be sure to check out more of our content right here on the Flames Nation YouTube page. We had a bunch of great long-form interviews. You can check out some videos we've done as well outside of the studio. And, of course, if you want more writing or merchandise stuff, flamesnation.ca or nationgear.ca. Appreciate you watching.